So we've got a very special edition of Mastering Money today. We've got Johnny, who's... Let's give it up. Johnny is visiting for these week and a half, 2 weeks from Miami. Johnny is awesome. I've known him for like 4 years or so now. He built an ed tech company for many years, almost 10 years, I think, right?
Wow.
And then sold it to Pearson, where he's been working there post-acquisition for the last few years. Finished your earnout. So now, congratulations.
Thank you.
Figuring out what's next now, but from a poker background side, he's been an attendee of our VCamp since the very beginning, but also worked as kind of like a founding member or like consultant for pokercoaching.com, which is one of the biggest online coaching sites. So not only does he have a deep background in just education as a whole, but especially poker education. So anyways, he offered to do a special little crash course today on donk betting, but Johnny, we'll pass it on to you.
All right. Thank you, Victor, and thanks for your gracious hospitality the last few weeks. It's been awesome playing with you guys and getting to know everyone here. I'm actually leaving tomorrow, so this is like my last foray before I'm out. I do want to correct something. I definitely wasn't a founding member of Poker Coaching, but I am friends with Jonathan Little, and I helped him build the tournament masterclass during COVID. So during COVID, I got really involved. There were a lot of synergies between the products that we were building, and since then, I've been involved in different various stuff with poker coaching. So, so this lesson, just to give you guys a little bit of background, let me make sure this is working. Maybe,
Click on it.
There we go, okay. Yes, okay. What we're gonna be talking about today is flop donking. And then if we have a little bit of time, I think we'll talk about flop check raising. And I put preview there because we're not gonna have time to do like a thorough discussion of both. Both of these things you could spend hours on each of these. But the relevance here is that I've been playing with you guys for a few weeks now, and you guys are really not great at this. So this was actually, inspired by the fact that I spent a lot of time at VClub, and I've noticed that there's just a lot of flop donking going on. And I'm not really sure that everyone understands like a framework of how to do this properly. And today we're gonna just break down that strategy. We're gonna talk about kind of from a GTO perspective, where do you start, how do you think about donking? Again, because I see a lot of it happening, and I don't know if you guys exactly know why you're doing it. So, and by the way, this is also a common leak with all recreational players. So we're going to talk about kind of the misconceptions and building up from the foundations how we want to actually think about it, and then hopefully we'll apply some of this at the tournament today. So, what is donking? Okay, so donking is also called leading. So those are synonyms of each other, and it's leading is when the out of position caller bets into the in-position aggressor of any previous street. Okay, so I know it's a lot of words, so I have a little diagram for you. This was drawn by AI, so it's not perfect, but imagine that, it folds around to the button who raises as the pre-flop raiser, that's the orange, right? And then your big blind, you're the big blind, and you call, right? You call, right? So now it's out of position and in position. Everyone following so far? We're going to be using those terms a lot today, so just remember we're actually going to be talking about out of position all day long, because that's where you find donking happening, okay? A donk bet would be that on the flop, the 3 cards come out, and I just bet, right? As the big blind, I bet into the pre-flop raiser, okay? Now, normally there's like a flow where you tend to check to the pre-flop raiser. This happens in a lot of different configurations, but sometimes you may choose to just bet your own hand right at the beginning. Now, how do we want to think about doing that? So, pulse check. I just want to get a show of hands, get some people talking. Do you currently have donks as a part of your poker strategy by show of hands? Okay, I see like 5 hands. Cool. Cool, so for the people that do have donks, what situation do you find yourself donking? Victor can go last. I'd love to hear, what situations do you find yourself leading into the pre-flop raiser on the flop? Yes.
Mostly in the blinds with range advantage. So if it's like low, or pretty draw heavy boards that would favor my range, those would be the situations where I would consider donking.
Cool. So yeah, so flops that you consider yourself to have a range advantage on the flop as the big blind. Okay, very cool. Now, are you looking just at the flop, or are you also looking at your hand to make the decision?
I would say just considering my range.
Got it. So like no matter what cards you have, if it comes out low, 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 you might just bet, regardless of what you have.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. That's a way to think about it. Who else?
What's the range? Like, I think
So what does range advantage mean?
Yeah.
Got it. So what it means is that when you're playing poker, you're actually supposed to be looking analyzing not just your exact holdings, but all the different combinations of hands that you could possibly have at that moment, right? So the big blind is actually notoriously difficult because you're going to defend a ton of hands, right? So what you want to be thinking about, and it's challenging, but you want to be thinking about what are all the hands that I would actually have in the spot, and how would they want to act, right? If you only act based on the strength of your hand, you're going to be very predictable, very easy for people to react to, right? And by the way, there's going to be some hands you don't have, right? So on the big blind, there are hands that you fold, right? So those are not included here. But cool. So now that you know so the range advantage would say out of all those hands that I have in the big blind, usually that flop is going to be better for me than it's going to be for the other guy, right? Usually it looks like I'm ahead, right? So that's what the range advantage might look like. So what other situations do you guys consider yourself or find yourself donking? I'll take one more. Yeah.
Board comes out very draw heavy. I have maybe top pair and I want a blocker.
Got it. So you may donk with value. So you might donk with value. So you have a draw heavy board where you have top pair, and does it matter the kicker? Just any top pair.
I'd say like top, but the board comes out like all red and my cards are black.
Okay. So basically, a value hand that you want protection on. Cool. Okay. So that's definitely a way to think about it, and I have seen a lot of that. So what's your name again? Zinir. So you have a value hand, you're worried you're going to get outdrawn, and you just bet your hand, right? Cool. And then finally, the last question, this is kind of similar. How do you currently decide which hands to donk and why? Like specifically, not just talking about boards, but also hands too. Not just flops, but what hands? So you said just basically any hand. That's one way to look at it. Zinir's saying maybe value, like vulnerable value, like a top pair that could get outdrawn. Any other ways to think about it? Yeah.
Maybe like if you're close to like a straight and if they have a pair, you're maybe trying to get them out of it.
Got it. So are you saying that maybe they're beating you right now, but you can get them to fold a better hand?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So maybe like a scary flop that you're gonna have more straight cards than they're gonna have, and you might decide to bet it. Yeah. Are you saying even if you have the cards or if you don't have the cards?
Maybe, well.
You have some of the cards?
Yeah, some of them.
Oh yeah, you have some of the cards on a scary board. Cool. Yeah, Pei.
Maybe if my opponent's very passive and he's likely to check back when he has like 4 holdings, I can pour my money in now instead of giving.
Good. So the way you put it is interesting because Pei took it one level of abstraction higher. He's just saying any board where my opponent is likely to check back and they might fold if I bet, right? So you're not looking at like a specific board, specific cards. You're just saying they're probably going to check this. So if I bet it, they might fold, right? Or something like that. So I like that. Cool. So let's actually look at how to look at this. So actually poll button versus. So this is actually going to be what we call this is a configuration. So you have these 2 positions at a certain stack depth. And we're in a tournament. Tournament also called MTT, multi-table tournament. Okay, same thing. So we're going to be analyzing this all day long. Button is the in position, big blind is the out of position. 60 big blinds effective because that's a very common scenario you find yourself in a tournament. So we're just trying to like run-of-the-mill tournament. Okay, how often do you think the big blind should donk on the flop? I'll take so basically the answer is 2%, almost never. 10% with my best hands on many flops. That's weird, but yeah. 17% with my best hands on many. Oh, that's super weird. 35 with my best hands and some bluffs on many flops. I think this is supposed to be some flops. I don't know what happened there. This is AI, so it got weird. Yeah, I don't know how to do that on Microsoft Word. So by show of hands, who thinks it should be 2%? Okay, by show of hands, who thinks it should be 10%? By show of hands, who thinks it should be 17%? And finally, who thinks it should be 35%? Cool. All right. Ready? Drum roll. This is GTO. 2%. Almost never. We should almost never be donking, and that's why we're having this lesson right now, because I'm seeing way more than 2% donking. Yes?
Does that percentage change, like how many big blinds deep you are in?
Yeah, it could, but this is going to be pretty representative, and it's not going to change by a lot. If anything, it might change to like 3%, 4%, but we're always talking about single-digit amounts of donking, and I'm seeing way more than 2% donking here, okay? So you might be saying like, what? That's crazy. I'm gonna build the case using solvers. So common misconceptions about donking. If I have a good hand, I should bet it. So I think I'm seeing a lot of that. So imagine you have ace nine of diamonds, you called in the big blind, and the flop comes ace king nine, right? And you're like, I have top and bottom. I have an amazing hand. I should just bet it now, right? This is a misconception because this is a board that your opponent is very likely to bet, right? So by betting, you're actually accomplishing nothing. All you're getting them to do is fold their hands that might have bluffed at it, right? And you're also telling them you have a very strong hand, right? Because this is not likely to hit your range, right? So first of all, with your thick, this is called thick value. It's a very valuable hand. That would be a huge blunder to donk that. Another misconception is, I'm just trying to get my opponent out of the pot, right? So we heard that a little bit, right? So imagine you have a shitty ace, ace deuce off on ace king nine, right? And you're like, but I've got an ace, let me just bet and get them to fold like a king or something, right? That's still a mistake because you're not really accomplishing much. What you're doing is when they call you, you're getting in your money in bad because they have a better ace than you, most likely. And when they fold, you're getting them to fold a hand that was drawing slim. You're getting them to fold pocket queens. And they were like very, they were probably going to bet it and you were probably going to make money. You could have just called that hand. So anyway, these are very, very common. And that's why I think this kind of logic contributes to why we're seeing more than 2% donking. So how should we actually be thinking about donking? So as a general rule, you can just stop donking. It's generally fine for the out of position caller to check to the pre-flop raiser and allow them to continuation bet. Generally, okay? Because c-betting is so common, we're still gonna have the opportunity to get additional value with our premium hands, like top and bottom, and apply pressure with our bluffs, like our draws, using check raising, right? So we're going to be focusing that more into check raising and a lot less into donking, okay? So the first thing I wanna say here is that you could almost skip the rest of this lesson and just take out donks out of your range and you're already a better player, okay? Because donking is very strategic. If you are gonna do it, you need to know why you're doing it, right? I just gave you the cases for why most people are doing it. That's not why you should do it, right? So takeaway one, when you're donking, you're probably doing it wrong. And takeaway two, you don't need to donk to be a winning poker player. So I really wanna make that clear, okay? Now that being said, obviously I've prepared a lesson on donking, so I am gonna share with you guys how to think about donking. But even if this was all you took away from today, you're already learning something valuable, okay? And what you can think of is if I have a strong hand, a weak hand, a bluff, you can apply that pressure through a check raise and not through a donk, okay? But now let's look at what GTO actually says about donking. Like, where does that 2% actually come from? What are the themes there? So this is what the solvers say. So this is peak GTO. This is actually the solver that Poker Coaching came out with. I'll put in a plug for it. It's a lot cheaper than GTO Wizard. So if you guys want to check it out, it gives you a lot of that same information. GTO Wizard, I basically took the same exact spot. I ran them both, and they give you the same exact answer. Green, these are all checks. This is basically, I'll just show you guys what you're talking about. This is all possible flops. Imagine all possible hands and all possible flops. All the green is stuff that the big blind should be checking. The red, tiny little red over here, is the 2% of flops that you should consider donking. So notice that even the flops that are the best for donking, you're only donking half the time. There are no flops that you're pure donking. So again, that's why I'm saying you can be a winning player and just focus on the green, right? If you're doing the green, great, and you got a good check raising strategy, this is not gonna make or break your session, okay? Now that being said, I am gonna tell you guys more about this, right? We're gonna zoom in on it. So let's zoom in on how we structure this tiny little area over here. So this is what GTO Wizard says. So we're gonna plug more into GTO Wizard. And what it says is, now these are specific flops. This is a really cool report that you can generate on GTO Wizard. Actually, you can on Peak as well. And it shows you all the different flops. And the red is the donks. And the greens are the checks, right? So we're zooming in on this tiny little sliver over here. Imagine if we were zooming in over here, it would just all be green. And it would all be check, right? So I know that it might be a little bit small, but I'm gonna highlight a few different types of flops that tend to be donked, that you could consider donking. So the first is your low connected boards. So we were getting at this a little bit, that notice like the number one is like 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 6. So these are these flops where a straight is already possible on the flop, and it's much more likely that the big blind has a straight than the in position has a straight, right? Because I'm gonna be defending, the big blind's gonna defend with all of their combinations of 6, 7, right? 6, 7 off, 6, 7 suited, whereas in position, the button shouldn't be betting 6, 7 off. Sometimes you guys do, but shouldn't have all those combinations. And especially the lower you go, the more like shitty connected cards you have, right? So that's the first one. So low connected boards, you can consider donking. Not all the time, but 50% is fine. We've also got all our low paired boards. So something like 6, 4, 4. Right? Your 6, 4, 4, your 3, 5, 5, your 7, 3, 3. These are just boards where big blind is likely, you call it the big blind special, right? Like the big blind special is this poker lingo. I mean, I have napkins, I have shitty cards, but those cards are much more likely to connect with 7, 3, 3 than the in position button better, okay? By the way, if I'm going too fast, just let me know. Feel free to interrupt me anytime. And then we have our high, low, low paired boards. So this might be a little bit, this might have not been one that you think about, but like something like a queen 6, 6, okay? So on the one hand, queen is good for in position. The in position should have all the queens, right? They're raising with a lot of their queens, but they don't have that many 6s, right? Because they're not gonna be betting every single combination of a 6 that they have, right? Like pretty much all of the 6s, like 7, 6, 5, 6, 4, 6, 3, 6 off, 2, 6 off. In position is not supposed to bet those. You're just supposed to fold those on the button, right? Whereas in the big blind, I can call with more of those hands. You're not supposed to call with all of them, but you can call with more of them, right? So you get to actually donk that a little bit, right? Again, not all the time, but you can donk it when you have a 6 and donk it repping a 6 as well. But we'll talk more about how we structure that. So these are your 3 main categories that your donks are gonna come from. And notice that it's very dependent on the flop. It's not, we're gonna look at our cards too, but the first thing you're looking at is flop, right? So you got those 3 categories down? Cool. Actually notice there's actually nothing monotone here. Monotone means it's a single suit. And like you were talking about top pair that could be outdrawn, that's actually not a hand class that you see donking. We can talk more of it why later, but it's just not. It's not gonna be in the list, okay? So if you see it come spade, 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 you're never donking. You're always checking it, no matter what you have. You could have flopped a flush, you're not donking it, okay? Cool. So the main theme here about these 3 is that these are flops that will not be c-bet frequently. That's the main thing. So Pei got to that earlier. What we're doing is we're breaking down, we're deconstructing flops that will not be c-bet frequently. And it's these 3. And imagine, put yourself in position's shoes. You bet on the button and the flop came, one of these, one of these straightening ones, or 7, 5, 4. I don't love betting there. I could have a really good hand. I could have ace jack, with a backdoor, and I don't want to bet because I could get raised, I'd probably be behind. So those are the boards where you actually can take the lead because you know that in position's probably going to do a lot of checking, right? Cool. So let's zoom in a little bit more. So let's zoom in. Now that we know the 3 types of boards that we want to start donking, let's actually look at like, okay, well, we also have to look at our hands too. So it was mentioned earlier that, I don't know your name.
Mine?
Yeah.
Gabriel.
Gabriel. So Gabriel doesn't even look at his cards. He just says, hey, it's one of these 3 boards. I'm going to donk. That's not necessarily correct because we talked about how you only want to be donking about 50% anyway.
Not at 100%.
Right, exactly. There are some cards that you're definitely not going to be donking. So now we want to explore what types of hand classes are we going to choose to donk with on one of these favorable boards. Again, that's how we get to such a low number. That's how we only get to 2% because it's only on favorable boards with certain holdings. So let's see what those holdings are. So this is what GTO Wizard says. I don't know how much time you guys have spent with these solver readers, so I will just do a little orientation. These are all the hands that the big blind should have in this position, right? That they called flop, and let's say the board comes 3, 4, 5 with a flush draw, right? And big blind should have all these hands. Gray means that you don't have these hands. These are just hands that you folded pre-flop, right? So you don't have any of the grays. The green is all the checking that you're doing. The red is all the donking that you're doing. So notice there's a lot of red. Why is there a lot of red? Because I picked the most favorable board to donk, right? So like if I had picked other boards, it would be all green, right? This is one of the 3 types of boards that you can donk. And as you see, it's a very mixed strategy. There's no like super easy way to describe exactly like what you should do with 8-7 off, right? It's a mix, right? But how can we, but what we do see is that you should be donking about 40% of the time, right? We had talked about 50, 40, that's what GTO Wizard says, 40% of the time. So why don't we try to parse out what are the themes of the types of hands that we're going to be donking with? I know there's a lot of red, so what you're doing is you're looking at the red and you're looking for patterns. And by the way, this is actually what professional poker players do. They stare at these things all day and they just say, where can I find some patterns, right? So can you guys find any pattern of like a type of hand class, not just a single hand, but you know, a group of hands that likes to donk? Yes, Gabriel.
Combo draws. We're seeing like 7 deuce suited.
I don't think we have 7 deuce. 7 deuce is down here. 7 deuce suited, I'm sorry.
To the right.
Got it. Yeah. Okay, over here. Yeah, you're right. You do. Yeah, so we have a bunch of 7 deuce suited, right? So 7 deuce suited would be open-ended, right? Because an ace or a 6 brings a straight, and you're probably raising with all the flush draws, right? So you're raising with your hearts. You're donking with your hearts, and you're probably donking with your diamonds. And you probably have to donk with even more, like your clubs too, right? In order to get there, yeah.
Seems to be a trend around like if you have at least 1 low card in your hand. So
Yeah, like basically cards that connect with this, right? If you have cards around here or actually are there. So let me just break this down for you guys. So what we have is our value, right? So first of all, we're gonna be donking mostly with like our pairs, like our top pair. That's where we can pick donks from. Again, our offsuit top pairs, our sets, our straights, right? Those are all donking, all right? We've also got our obvious bluffs. Our obvious bluffs are the straight and the flush draws, right? The cards that kind of connect. Okay, that's winning so far. Who thinks it's 14? Who thinks it's 18? All right, the right answer is 18%. 18%. So I'm just showing you guys the tendencies are all wrong, right? You guys are donking with a lot of hands that you should be check raising, right? And it's scary. This is an ace high board. Your opponent's gonna have a lot of aces, and you might even think we have 0% check raises. Nope. Pretty consistently, almost every board, you should be aiming to check raise about 20% of the time, which is absolutely nuts. So then you're like, well, how do I check raise 20%? I'm not gonna have that much value. You're gonna need a lot of bluffs, right? So let's look at the solver. And look, it says 17.8%, plugged it in, 17.8. We are folding a lot. Like, you have to fold, right? Like there's a bunch of junk on ace 3-5 that you just get rid of, right? But you're doing a whole lot of raising, okay? So what are the themes here? I forgot if I have, this is the last slide. So this is our last slide for the day because it's a preview, and in order for me to build a proper module on check raising, we would need an hour, right? Because this is a very complicated topic and we're just looking at one board, right? So we're just gonna do this interactively together. What do you guys see? Help me construct the patterns for where we're putting our check raise range from.
I mean, any gut shot. Or like a lot of gut shots.
What I would say is let's start with value. What do we see as value? Let's start there. What's the value that we're check raising?
Sets in 2 pairs.
Yeah, definitely. I see sets, 3-3. I see 5-5. We don't have ace-ace. I see all of our 2 pairs, ace-5-0, ace-5 suited. Ace-0 surprisingly isn't, so that one's a little bit weird. Computers do weird things sometimes, but in general, right, and our 5-3, cool. So that's our value. What are our obvious bluffs? Oh, and obviously our straights too, right? So do we have 2-4? Yeah, 2-4 is 100%, right? So we had talked about, do you want to call? You could, but in order to have enough bluffs, you're going to need to raise with that hand every single time, right? In order to get the max value from your best hands and then hit that basically 20% check raise, you're going to need to raise that hand 100%. So what else? So we have our obvious bluffs. So these are like all of our gut shots. So we've got like 6-4, almost 100%. Our 5-4, a pair and a straight draw. Our 7-4, is that double gutted or just?
Double gutted.
Yeah, double gutted. A lot of things with like, you know, a 4, a deuce, queen deuce offsuit, that's a gut shot, stuff like that. And then we've got our non-obvious bluffs, and our non-obvious bluffs are going to be really hard to find, and we're not going to focus too much on them. So like for some reason, the solver loves Jack-6 suited, okay, with backdoor flush draws. I doubt too many of us are finding the Jack-6 check raise on here, and if you're not, that's okay, right? The top players in the world at Triton, they might be finding that, and like at Poker Go, they might be finding that. We're not finding it, and that's okay. But this is the way we want to think about check raising, and the whole point here is really just to like spark your curiosity. First of all, I mean, obviously we have some takeaways about donking, right? But then to spark your curiosity about thinking more about your check raise strategy, you probably are not check raising enough, and you probably are not balancing your value with enough bluffs, right? I would imagine that a lot of the tendency in this room is going to be to check raise your made hands on the flop, or donk with them, right? So we're going to stop donking, and to check raise those. But then in order to check raise those, if you check raise them, you're letting your opponent know that you have a strong hand, unless you have enough bluffs to balance it with. So that's the point of, that's the end of the lesson. And we can take a few questions.
Yeah, does anyone have questions?
So many.
I'm really curious about his question earlier, which is if a person is donking too much.
Yeah, how do you exploit that?
Yeah, and obviously depends on which type of hands they're donking.
Yeah.
But like.
So this is what I'll say first of all, and I don't think, I'm not going to have the perfect answer for this. I'll share with you guys how I think about it, because a lot of this stuff is hard to put into a solver because people donk for different reasons, right? So the first thing I try to do is I try to understand why they're donking, and I try to see a few of their hands at showdown. I tend to overfold a little bit. So when someone donks into me, I'm okay getting rid of some of my like weaker hands until I understand what they're doing better. And you know, maybe it means I lost a little bit of value, or I'm folding a little bit too much. But I've noticed the general population tendency is to donk with made hands. And if I don't have a made hand that's already better than theirs, like I tend to overfold. Now, another way though, let's say that you start to see patterns, right? And you start to see, oh, they're always doing this when they have a shitty top pair, which is actually pretty common, right? They have like a bad top pair, they just want to end the hand. Well, at that point, now that if I have a good read on the person, I've seen a few hands at showdown, I've seen that they don't have a very complex donking strategy. They just tend to donk with their bad top pairs. depending on how deep I am, I might be able to get them to fold that, right? But that's risky because I might have to put all my chips in play in order to do it, right? And you guys know, you guys are very loose. So there's a lot of you guys in here that are willing to make a call down for all your chips with a bad ace, which is not good, but that's just the way it is, right? So that's bad. But you have to just know your player, right? Like so much of this is just like knowing player tendencies, knowing who you're playing, and just playing poker against them. If you think this is the kind of person that wants to just end the hand now, but doesn't want to play a big pot, start raising them. So when you have value, you have a hand that actually has a high tendency to be good right now, but by the river it's not going to be good. You can check raise that to basically get them to fold a high equity hand, right? So if I have like 5-4, there's a bluffing aspect where I'm, hopefully, I'm representing a straight or whatever, but there's also the aspect that I'm getting them to fold a lot of cards that could outdraw me later. So the solver likes to actually raise with a lot of hands that are vulnerable now. For example, you'll see like pocket twos, like not this time, but like on a lot of the other boards that we're looking at, like pocket twos might be a raise because it's a pair now. You can just get them to fold, realize, end the hand now. So that's like my interpretation. Victor, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that's I think one is also like you probably unblock a lot of their folds as well.
Sure. Yeah.
By not having any of the high cards, you get to continue barreling on a lot of good cards where you just improve equity. You make a lot of straights. You make a lot of two pairs on turns when it comes low card. But that's my interpretation.
Cool.
What does the solver say about the sizing for the raise if they're, let's say, doing a third on that?
In general, raise sizing is actually pretty standard. Out of position, it depends on how deep you are, but out of position, you can raise like a bit more than 3x of, it depends on the flop bet, right? A typical C bet is going to be, let's say, 25 to 33% C bet. You could go like 3.5 times what they raise. You don't have to. You could go 3. Sometimes you go 2.5, depending on how shallow stacks are. There are a lot of times where you're doing check raising with like 25 big blinds, and you're allowed to check raise like if they put in, let's say, I don't know, 33% pot, and you're allowed to make it like 85%. It's weird when you put it in percentage terms, but basically you're allowed to like 2.3x what they did, and you're still going to get a lot of folds. It doesn't always have to be a gigantic bet. And then check raises are almost never gigantic bets, because usually what you're trying to actually do is get money in on the turn. So I don't think I've ever seen like a check raise strategy where you're just like doing like a 10x. Cool? Yeah.
Just another question. I know we're talking about flop donking, but how different is the strategy like when it comes to the turn? And like what happens when you check? Everyone checks it down, like, and then it, like if it's on you to act, like,
yeah.
Do you check again, or are you raising then?
So I mean, multiple hours of analysis are going to be needed to answer that question. But what I will say is that when it goes check check, let's say just heads up, it goes check check, and then you bet on the turn. That's called a turn lead, or also a turn donk. And it's gonna be, we're talking about similar properties where it's boards that are really bad for our opponent and really good for us. And it's gonna be a mix of thick value and hands that have no showdown right now that are bluffs. And then your non-obvious ones too. So that's also called a turn probe. But the idea is that it's just like cards that are not really great. Like basically, let's say that the turn is an ace, you're almost never betting there, right? Even if you have like 2 pair, the turn's an ace, you're almost always gonna let them bet it, and then you would have a turn check raising strategy, right? And you'd have some bluffs there too. So interesting stuff, but that's a whole other part of the game tree, so we can't talk about that too much today. All right, cool guys. Good luck at the tournament.